Hi.
Very wonderful. Hi. Jackie's checking everybody in. How are you? Hello. There you go. And Barbara. And don't you love
Hi, Kim.
Hello. Welcome to my house and my garden.
Good.
I'm actually Luella today.
Okay.
You like my fancy mask?
Of course.
This
Sure.
is the year of COVID, but it's going to be hard to talk with a mask on. So, yes.
Well, we can keep a safe distance.
Okay. Well, I will save all the information about the house
Okay.
until we get rolling, but everybody's just checking in for the Tea with Luella before the porch walk, our very first porch walk.
So you can turn around. Let me see the back of your hat. That's pretty. Hello.
Welcome. And
This year, and I'm getting 2 tapefuls in a couple of weeks. So far, not a good year. Really? Well, you know, she stepped up.
It looks like that one.
Have fun, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe.
all right, have a nice day.
You too.
I really hate it when it happens when I'm driving.
I thought you just said
Oh, there's George. How you doing, George?
I'm doing fine. Welcome to Cracker House in our brand new Porch Walk. Everybody should have a good time today, and we're hoping that the weather holds out for us.
Good. All right.
I know
All
some
righty.
of these are so easy and others are terrible. They're also the same. Yeah.
Here. Let me give you a bat too. There you go.
Yeah, she needs another one. Like she's got 3.
But on the reverse side is a list of all the homes.
Well, I don't know if we can put down at the because I think they'll keep it perhaps a little bit more pressure.
I am playing Cecilia Cracker today. This is my lovely home. I hope you enjoy it. I am the third wife of Mr. George Cracker. He lost his other 2 wives in childbirth. But since I knew them so well, I was delighted to marry him. But we had to get dispensation from the Catholic Church because you can't marry your sisters. So, to make him your wife. So my sister Harriet was married to him. And I am Cecilia, the youngest sister of the group. But when we got married, I had to actually ask my brother-in-law, Senator Vance from North Carolina, well-known man, to get us a dispensation so we could marry. And my marriage certificate is in the front room here if you ever get in. We're closed right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's very cool. Thank you.
Have fun, ladies.
Where are you starting your tour?
welcome to the Samuel Whitney house.
Thank you.
Samuel Whitney was born in the early 1800s. He owned over 200 acres actually of farmland in Macomb Township. And that's where he resided his whole life. So why they call it the Samuel Whitney house, other than the fact that he bought the land and built the house, he never resided here.
Oh.
So in, I believe it was 1876, Gills Hubbard passed away. He owned all of this land.
Hubbard Street, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And this is the Giles Hubbard, I want to say subdivision. So he passed away in 1876, and then his estate started to be sold off in 1877. And that's when Samuel Whitney in 1877 came and bought this land, from my understanding, all the way from, what is that?
Eldridge.
Eldridge, all the way down to Madison,
Okay.
and then all the way to Hubbard.
Oh, okay.
So
Wow.
in 1877, he purchased the land for $300.
All of it?
All of it.
Oh my gosh.
And in 1878, he sold the property to his two of his sons, for for $3,000.
Oh my gosh.
So
They
it
made a
indicates
little
that the
profit
house was
there.
built in 1877. So we're the oldest house in the neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
This is a 1877 Italianate architecture. A lot of it's been changed, so we are attempting to put it back. The front roof was the roof over the porch was actually flat. So we've got materials on order to come in to start restoring the porch back to the way it used to look. Samuel was married to Ann Stroop. They had 13 children. Throughout the course of that, most of the 13 children lived here.
Wow.
The house stayed in the family. Niece Anna Whitney, at one point, was a home ec teacher from Mount Clemens High School.
What was the last name?
Whitney,
I don't remember Whitney.
Anna Whitney, and she owned the property and resided here till 1959. That's when the house was sold and left the Whitney family.
And you live here?
I do, yes. We're the owners now trying to.
Oh my gosh.
We're the owners now trying to. There's some pictures over there. There is a small one that was taken in 1980, where you can see that the roof was actually flat. These will go back to rounded columns. We have a picture there of Sophrina. Sophrina was one of the Whitney children. The other large picture is of Samuel Whitney,
Okay.
father. And then the small picture with all the family members is Samuel with his 13 children on his 50th wedding anniversary. On the bottom shelf, we just have a few artifacts that we found in the walls as we've, replaced siding and insulating the house and.
Oh, look at a little shoe.
Yep.
So, I was just going to ask. So, was there any more additions put on this house? Or this is it? This is how
The
it was?
kitchen became larger
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
in about the 1920s,
Okay. Wow.
between 1920 and 1940.
And it's a single family?
It is a single family. We're very fortunate that this is
Yeah.
one of the few homes that was not torn apart. It made into a multi-unit, a multi-unit home. All the rooms are still original. They're all being restored.
How beautiful. Now, are you from Mount Clemens?
No, we're not. I'm not.
Oh.
I actually was born and raised in Ferndale, Michigan.
Okay.
My other half was born and raised in Madison Heights. And about 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, I moved out to Clinton Township. And from there, our family started to grow, so we needed more space, and we leveled homes, and he's a carpenter, so here we are.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay. Your dog. My dog. He's being a good boy, isn't he? He's not barking at anybody. So the story is.
Because in that room, the ceiling follows that same bell shape.
All classy.
So when our daughter grows up, she's gonna, I'm sure, love that room.
Yeah.
I'm Ian Cole, and this is the Jarko house, which was built in 1905 by John H. Jarko. He was a German immigrant who came here, and he built this in 1905, and he was about in his 50s. and his claim to fame was coal and lumber. And eventually he passed on to his son, who was also John Jarko, and he had a shop here right in downtown Mount Clemens where he did wallpaper and paints and different building materials. So it was in the Jarko family until about 1983, and then after that it bounced around to a few different people and it eventually became a business. So me and my wife moved here in 2016, her name is Hope, and since then we've been pulling back a lot of the business side of it and trying to convert it into a single family home. And there was a lot of stuff like exit signs and business signs. There was actually a big light up sign in our front yard which we took down, and a lot of things that were not very homey and not very comfortable to live in. So we've been peeling it back the last 4 years and putting it back together and restoring some of the wood and restoring some of the character in the house. So we love it here, and thank you for stopping by.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It's definitely a labor of love to restore those windows. So that's been a huge part of our house restoration. And if you've driven by any time in the last 2 years and seen our house boarded up, you know, looking a little bit like an abandoned building, that's because we've been working on our windows. We're almost done with that project.
Yeah.
Once we have that, then we're going to be able to paint the outside. So we haven't bothered with any sort of lawn or gardening work yet, because that'll all get squished once we redo this porch and then eventually paint the house in the next year. So we're picking out our colors for that.
The license plate is the year of the car, the original plate. Didn't put it on the front yet.
Nice.
1926 Ford Coupe. This was originally built by Sylvester Widrick in 1887. He soon, the newspapers articles mentioned him buying the lot for $350 from Euphemia Hubbard in July 6, 1887, and then another paper said in July 22nd of that year that he was about ready to build. And he only owned the house for 2.5 years, and then he sold it and moved on. And the second family, second family to own it for the longest period of time was the Upliger Matthews family. And at one time there were, he had taken in his aged mother, his 2 sisters, and one sister was widowed at age 26 and had 2 children. And he also owned the house free and clear. So he was apparently got his money from somewhere, I don't know where, but he was doing very well at age 39 and owned the house free and clear. He did a number of improvements on the house. The original house did not have this front porch on it. It just had a little cupola over the door, according to Ed Matthews, his great-grandson, or niece, I should say, his great niece. And then sometime in the 20s he built this front porch all the way across, and he raised the back of the house to accommodate a new bathroom in 1900 when the plumbing became available, and he needed room for his family that that he took in. So yeah, then the third family is the Widrick family that I show pictures of. I have the most pictures of, if you want to look at it. And there, he was worked for Macomb County Abstract in Mount Clemens here. So I don't know a whole lot about him, but they owned it for about 20 years, from 1946 to the late 1960s. I'm the 7th owner, and the Whitings were the 3rd owner, and then there were 3 other owners, you know, besides me after that. And, but the one that owned it the most were 2 brothers who were farmers, and they sold it to Edgar and Alberta Maynard. If you may know the name, it comes from A&E Appliance, Albert and Edgar Appliance, which is on Gratiot near, I believe it's still there, Gratiot and 9 Mile. He's retired and he lives in Florida now. And he sold it in 1976 to Donna and William Denny. And then they subsequently got divorced, and I bought the house from his ex-wife, his ex-wife, Donna Mae Eckhout, in 1980. So I've owned it for, it'll be 40 years this November. So
Okay.
that's about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The house was first built for the Sylvester.
She nice, look her over once or twice. Ask you very confidentially, nice, cast an eye in her direction. Don't think she's kind of sweet. Ask you very confidentially.
Is Mary Hamilton, and this is my home. If I may, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. Originally, I hailed from Pennsylvania, the town of Newcastle. And as a young man, I obtained a job in sales. I was a representative for a shoe company, a job that involved a lot of travel. I traveled mostly by train. In fact, my territory covered probably half of the country. And occasionally, my travels would take me to Detroit. From there, I liked the town so much that I decided to make it my home. So back in 1889, I set up a residence over on Gratiot Avenue, 8th Street, the number over there. And after a little bit of time in Mount Clemens, I met my sweet wife, gal by the name of Rose. Well, you know, within 3 years of me moving to Mount Clemens, Rose and I tied the knot. That was back in '92. We had a nice wedding. It was a nice affair. It was held over at my father's house, Charles Grossbeck, over on Cass Avenue. 168 Cass, that was that house that was in the middle of the orchard over there. And we had a pretty good marriage, and at least we were blessed with one child, a daughter that we named Ruth. And as time went on, I was doing fairly well in my sales position. So Rose and I decided we wanted to build a home. Well, we knew we wanted to stay in Mount Clemens. And finding the exact spot to build was not a problem. Because you see, Rose had a best friend. Her name was Blanche Stiles. Blanche That was for you, cameraman, baby.
They like you. You do have an audience.
That's channel .25.
Oh, that's nice. You need a little rest, I know.
We'll keep you on it.
I guess I remember the opals, you
Yes,
know.
I'm gonna take this down now. I think I'm 6 feet from you.
Let me get this a lot for this home in 1891 for $275. I moved into the house in 1892, having built it with the help of my family and friends, while I was employed full-time as a janitor at the county courthouse. It's a 2-bedroom home with a kitchen, dining room, and front parlor right behind me here. The facilities were originally out back, which meant we had an outhouse. Right? We later added a modern bathroom and indoor plumbing. In the 1920s, a basement was dug underneath the house, and the original potbelly stoves used to heat the home were replaced with a coal-fueled radiant furnace. The red brick foundation was added to support the house. The house next door was identical to ours when it was built, and it was occupied by my brother Alfred and his family, that house right there. Along with my wife Elizabeth, we raised 4 children in this house. My firstborn, Julia, only lived 6 months. We had 2 sons and a daughter after that. In 1903, we lost our son Eddie when he drowned in the Clinton River. He was 13 years old. In 1915 was a very bad year for our family. In July, we lost our son Claude, and he died in a boating accident on the Clinton River. He was 18. In September of that year, our son Arthur died of an apparent heart attack while sitting at the dining room table. He would have been 24 years old on his next birthday. Our daughter Elsie was the only surviving child. In August of 1915, she married Martin Bark, a grocer from Detroit. They were married at Trinity Lutheran Church here in Mount Clemens. They lived in Detroit until they moved back to Mount Clemens to live with my widow, Lizzie, as indicated in the 1920 census. Martin became a partner in the Wolf Hardware, which eventually became the Mount Clemens Hardware at 67 North Walnut Street. Later, Donald Bark, Martin's son, bought the hardware with his brother Bob and continued to operate it until his son, Art, assumed ownership in the mid-1980s. It closed about 15 years ago. By the way, I died in 1916 of cancer of the throat at the Martha Washington Medical Facility at 117 Cass Avenue. That's now known as the Olympia Spa. I was 54 years old. Lizzie continued living at 45 Madison with her daughter and son-in-law. To help with family finances, she began washing, starching, and drying lace curtains for people here in town. Here are some of the stretchers she used to keep the shape of the curtains. She stated on many occasions that this activity was the only thing that kept her sanity after the tragedies that took her sons and the death of her husband. Elsie's son Donald kept the family tradition of being a member of the Trinity Lutheran Church. He was also a member of the Old Crowd. His sister Evelyn married a man named William Dopp. I am sure you've all heard of Dopp Furniture here in Mount Clemens. The current residents are Gary and Carol Ann Bark. He is my great-grandson. The Pingle homestead has been continually occupied by the family for 128 years. For the past 70 years, family members have been cultivating the same currant and grapevines in the backyard garden. By the way, most of the family members I mentioned today are buried at Clinton Grove. I just wanted to let you know that I bought my outfit today from the Montgomery Ward mail order catalog. Okay? We used to call it monkey wards around here. I got my Levi's from there just like the miners out in California. In the 1920s, they would be the first company to incorporate zippers into garment making. About that same time, the belt became very popular. My suspenders became less used. If if you'd like to go and take a tour of the garden in the back, you're welcome to do so. Lots of nice flowers and vegetables, and Gary might be back there and telling you what it's all about. Okay? Thank you. Did you want to hear the first pair of 1920s? A basement was dug under the house. The original potbelly stove used to heat the house.
Colonial Court, yes. Yes.
These things are really good.
Hello.
They'll see pine tree in the garden because it's going to suck all the nutrients. So I kept digging a hole, digging a trench around here to keep the roots going this way. And one day I started trimming this big. The bottom of it. These all fell down. Normally when they're in a case like that, they stay there. But
Hi folks.
Hello.
Thanks for stopping by today. My name is Henry Pingle.
In 1837. So, and in 1837, they must have bought all this property, a huge amount of property, built a big house. And then in 1857, Giles passed away. So, at that time, they must have started breaking up the property and demolished the house. The house then picks up again in 1904. It's owned at that time by Ann and LaVarge Schneider. Now, I can't find when they bought it or anything, but they own it in 1904, and they're selling it at that time. So they're selling it to Joseph Iman. Now, he's got a cool story. He's from Scotland. He's born there. He marries a woman. I don't know how they met in London, but he marries a woman named Amelia from London. And they immigrate to the United States. And he buys a farm in Clinton Township. Now, he must have done very well because on the census it says farmer, and then the next one says farmer, and then the next one says capitalist. It's like, okay, he's got it going on. Also during this time, he volunteers for the Civil War, and he joins the Michigan 22nd Infantry. So, and I found a picture of all the veterans here, and I'm pretty sure he's in it because he was very involved. He was the chaplain of the Grand Army Post, so stayed very active. So he lived in 43 Lincoln, and he built this as a rental because he's a capitalist. And so he starts renting it out. Now it first appears on the directory in 1909, 1910. So it could have been built a little bit before that, so we're not sure. But the first renters are John and Josephine McCarthy. So John McCarthy, he works for the Rapid Railway as the chief dispatcher, and they're here about a year. And then the next renter is Ralph Harrington Donaldson. Now the Donaldsons are pretty famous here in Mount Clemens. Ralph is living here. He works for the Savings Bank, and he's about to get married. And what a perfect place to stay while he's building that 5,000 square foot house right there, 92 Lincoln. So that's actually a gorgeous house. I walked through it when it was on the market. So he lives here while the house is being built. Now about this time, Joseph Inman, he's really up there. He's 77, for this time, he's 77 years old. His wife has passed away. His siblings have passed away, and he's alone. And on a chilly January night, he goes to the front door of his house at 43 Lincoln, and he calls out to two men walking by. And he says, "I'm very sick. Can you please help me?" And these two men take him to Martha Washington Sanitarium, the hospital. And unfortunately, it's too late for him. He has pneumonia and he passes away. So his heirs sell the home. So now they sell the home to the Epleys. Now, what I can't figure out why is they sell it to Frank Epley, who's 18 years old, and 3 days later, Frank sells it to his dad. Why? I don't know. But they're a great family. They own Epley and McLean, which is a grocery store. And then you see on the directory that it seems to circulate through the family. You've got Frank and Lydia, and then Fred and Ann, and then Carl and Geraldine are living here. So I think they're all young and building houses and just kind of staying here while they do that. So they sell it then to who I say is the star of the house, which is Sarah Augustus Stevenson, also known as Sadie. So Sadie
came here. She was from Ontario, Canada. She met Ray Demrick in Canada, and they immigrated to the United States, and they bought a farm in Erin Township. So I don't know if you're familiar with Erin Township, but that's Roseville now, that area. So they have a farm, and things are going great, and today would be Ray's birthday, August 15th. But unfortunately, in 1906, he's very sick at this time. So 3 days later, on August 19th, he passes away from tuberculosis. And she's left with 2 children and a farm. So she moves to another place. She's renting for a while, and then I see she's about 34 years old, and she marries William Brenneman. Now she's 34 and he's 28, so I was like, oh, all right, go Ceedie. So she marries William Brenneman, and they have 3 children. So things seem like they're going along nicely for her. She's a dressmaker, but then you see in the records that it says divorce pending. And then you see on the census she puts herself down as widowed. She's not widowed, he's still alive. And then divorce is pending again, and so I'm not sure what's going on. And then I found the record that he was institutionalized. So he was institutionalized in Pontiac at the mental health institution there, and he wound up spending his life there until 1966. So I'm not sure what happened to William, but it didn't have a good ending for him. So Ceedie's here with 5 children as a dressmaker by herself from 1917 to 1947. 2 of her children do very well for them that I can find. Charles goes into the Navy from 1918 to 1921 and then gets into the automotive industry. And her daughter, Florence, goes to the University of Michigan and becomes a social worker. She's hanging out with Edna Jarchow from 12 Lincoln, so they've become girlfriends on the street. And while she's hanging out with Edna, she meets her future husband, who's an accountant. And they kind of become, socialites in Mount Clemens and then in Detroit, and they have a beautiful landmark kind of house in Detroit. In 1942, I found Ed's draft card, which says 86 Lincoln on it in 3, and redid all the hardwood floors, all the plaster, but it kept all the original woodwork. It's all 17 original.
Structure, we believe, was built in 1899. There is a date carved into the rafters of the attic that kind of tell us that that's about the age of the house. Also, we found when we were doing some siding work some years back, some newspaper that was used as insulation that was dated 1899. So we figure it's about that time. The first known people to live here was the Trombley family. George and Sadie and their 2 children lived here from 1909 to 1910. In 1911, the Corey family moved in. George and Betsy Corey are Dave's great-grandparents.
Oh.
They moved in with their 3 children, Arthur, Melvin, and Mildred. Mildred is Dave's grandmother. They rented the home from 1911 to 1917 for, we believe, $8 a month. In 1917, Betsy Corey purchased the home for $1,700. They lived here. Their sons moved on, married, moved to, I believe, East Point. Mildred stayed on until about 1930 when she married her husband, Edwin Anderson. They left for a time, and they came back to help out when her father, George's health started to fail. They lived here after his passing with Betsy. And when Betsy passed on, the house moved on to them. It became their home. They had 1 son. Their son Carl grew up here. Carl is Dave's father. And when they married, and when he married his wife Verna in 1959, they moved into a converted upper apartment here. That's where Dave spent the first 2 years of his life. They moved to Clinton Township. Mildred stayed on until the early 80s when she could no longer care for herself. We moved in 1982 when we got married and purchased the house in 1987. Raised our 3 children here. So there has been a member of the family living in this home since 1911.
Oh, wow.
The house, like you say, doesn't look so old now. There's some photos there that show what it looked like in the early 30s, early to mid 30s. There are no earlier photos of the home, but I don't think they really wasted photos on structures back then so much. It was more people, and we do have some older photos of people as well. The porch has changed quite a bit. They dug out the basement after the home was already built in the 1930s, so it had been here for quite some time. They dug right underneath it. There's some photos of that there. There's photos of that car from way back, and also of Mildred and her then fiance Edwin standing right about here and looking at the neighborhood in that direction. So there's a lot of pictures of this home and its many incarnations. There's been some additions to it. We converted it back to single family when we had our children because we needed space, obviously. So yeah, it's been here a long time. It's got a lot of history. Edwin and Mildred on the left, and that's George and Betsy Corey on the right. The photo that's down is them and their 3 children. Well, Mildred and her...
It's just with the diet course.
How about the beautification? So, you know. So
Are you on the beautification?
yeah, beautification. Yeah.
How long have you been on that one?
Oh, cool. And this house was built in 1910 by John Whitney and his wife Maud. And he worked for the post office. They lived here quite a few years, so then, you know, what attracted me to the house was it had the oak columns and the foyer and the staircase, and there's pocket doors, wood floors, you know, a 12-foot tub upstairs. So, yeah, it's a nice neighborhood and everything. You know, put some improvements like a new porch and everything, because it had wrought iron and stuff. But you know, yeah, I've done a few things, but basically, I mean, there's the old wallpaper there. Must be good wallpaper. Still holds up good. I like it. So, yeah,
Might as well. Why change it if it works?
Yeah, nice place.
I like the purple.
They're the same color, but I like the black. Well, I'm over there. So I've only been here a year, but the house was the foyer because there's oak staircase and the pillars and stuff.
Oh, I bet it's beautiful.
And wood floors and pocket doors and closet bathtub upstairs, and they took good care of it, you know. Although the kitchen,
lilac stairs and the lilac cute.
yeah, so it's like 3 bedrooms, like and an office, you know, and there's a dining room and everything. So yeah, I really like having the dining room for the family and stuff, because Fraser lives in a little house is trying to get everybody in or put them in the basement. Yeah, it's a really good, comfortable house. A nice neighborhood, nice people.
I've only lived here a year, but I love the house, and you can see there's a picture of it from like the 80s when it was before it was sided and updated in that way. So maybe that will show you a little more how it used to look. And then there's also on the table an obituary of the first man I recorded as living here. He was a reverend for the First Presbyterian Church in Mount Clemens, and was reverend from 1909 to 1913 while he lived here. And then he was transferred to Detroit to Indian Village and moved to Detroit on Iroquois. And then on back, there's a picture and article of the man that lived here in August and his family. Sorry, the tree. Him and his family, that's William Lee, who was superintendent of schools in this county commissioner of schools for this area. I guess he has a school in Richmond named after him. And but it was kept updated, and you know, it has central air, and it has, you know, nice bathrooms and kitchen was all up. So people kept, you know, good care of it. So I really love like the old features, the big high ceilings, you know, all that kind of thing.
How many bedrooms?
There's 3 bedrooms and a bath upstairs, and they're good-sized bedrooms. And then downstairs we have a little den, which I think used to be a bedroom for whoever needed the room downstairs. And where it used to be, I think, a closet, they turned into a shower in the little bathroom yonder. So now we have a shower on the main floor and upstairs. So that was kind of a good idea. I still have a day bed in there if somebody, you know, needs to sleep in there, but you know, we have 3 bedrooms, and it's just my husband and I now. My kids are grown, and so, just the 2 of us and our 2 dogs living here. So, are you ready?
I'm ready. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tracy, and this is my house, 124 Lincoln. It was built in 1906. It's a Dutch colonial. And there's a picture on the table there from, I believe, the 1980s, before it was all sided, and you can see how maybe it looked more, you know, in the beginning, how originally it looked. There's also on the table an obituary of the first man who had this house that's recorded from 1909 to 1913, and that was Samuel Stitt, and he was the Reverend for the First Presbyterian Church in Mount Clemens there. From 1909 to 1913, he was Reverend for that church. Then he got transferred to Detroit, and he lived in Indian Village on Iroquois. And then the other pictures in the back are of the Superintendent of School, County Commissioner of Schools, and that's William Lee, and he had a school named after him in Richmond. He was like the longest resident here. He lived here from 1917 till at least the end of the 40s, 1949. So he was probably the one that lived in this house the longest. And I've lived here, my husband and I, for a year. My mom's family's all from Mount Clemens, so I'm familiar with the area, and I love all these old houses, and I love this neighborhood, and I'm really enjoying living here. So.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. This was built in 1906. It's a Dutch colonial. This house is 114 years old. There's a picture there from the 80s that maybe
So George Miller is a famous cement pourer in the city of Mount Clemens, and his initials are at the end of our sidewalk, but many of the sidewalks that you walk on in Mount Clemens are actually poured by George Miller. So you'll see his initials throughout the city. He also designed this block that you see here. It's believed that he actually poured all of these blocks in his front yard while he was building the home. He started building in 1905 and he moved in 1909. He thought that this was going to be the next big thing, and I think we're house one of one with this design, with the brick. And but anyways, it was very unique for that time period.
Yeah, so we lived here for about 7 years, and then Frank joined the Coast Guard for World War II. So at that time I sold the house and moved back in with my family on Dickinson Street. And when Frank came back from the Coast Guard, we decided to purchase a house on Lodwick, and that is where we stayed for the rest of our time on Earth, because we lived in Mount Clemens our entire life.
Once I got back from the Coast Guard, I started Priest Cadillac and Pontiac car dealership in downtown Mount Clemens. I was the oldest car dealer in the nation. I had been a car dealer for 44 years, and upon retiring and ending it, we lived in Mount Clemens for the rest of our lives and just really enjoyed watching the families move into this house and kept up with them. The family after us was the Little family, and they moved in here from 1923 to 1935.
So our little challenge for everyone today is to pay attention to the sidewalks and see that the original sidewalks, most of them have George Miller's initials, just like ours back there too. So if they haven't been renovated, a lot of them are still poured from him.
I didn't know I could have moved.
Yeah, right here.
Sidewalk shots.
pictures up there. One is of us, and then the car dealership, which is suspected to be, we don't know for sure, but we think, going inside.
But so then directly connected to, the Trees family from the department store.
Yeah, so that was our nephew. Our nephew owned the department store. And apparently he was known throughout Mount Clemens as the town drunk. But and I saw my grandfather yesterday, who apparently knew him from being in the bars. So he confirmed that he was the town drunk.
Well, of course, attorney, even when we came, they had the Trees account. The Trees estate, they had left money to Trinity.
Yeah, that's them.
Still there.
Wow. Yeah, that would be them. They were, the whole family attended.
And there are certain restrictions. No, 129.
Another great grandson.
The right side.
Served in the Navy. And you know what? Every presentation is a wonderful knowledge. Yeah, that's for her to keep her in line over there. Got to watch her all the time.
Well, we work at it because we work at the Crocker House. So.
Heather and I work together, and this is her husband.
Okay, quite.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
And I got to tell you, I didn't build this house, but I know who did build it. That was Joe and Grace Dansby, and that's who I bought it from. My name is Almanzo Matthews, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of everything today, whether you want to hear it or not. I keep the stick candy for a reason. Actually, this was carved by a gentleman who lost his legs to diabetes. He lives in Tennessee, and he finds unique wood. They have a vine that... Sorry.
Go ahead, James.
Go ahead. Hey, I want to thank you for coming by today. My name is Almanzo Matthews, and I'm dressed this way because I was actually a bugler in the Civil War. And my job was to give out commands using a bugle that the men could hear over the sound of horses, over the sound of gunfire. You could hear the bugle. I'm going to tell you, I didn't build this house, but I know who did. That was Joe and Grace Dansby. Now, Grace was one of 9 children. She was part of the Teets clan over in Harrison Township. Now, her pa was an elder in the Presbyterian Church right here in Mount Clemens. Now, this is her before she married Joe. That picture's about 1898. Her and Joe got married about a year and a half later. Now, Joe's family had traveled from New York. He was a barber by trade. Had a little shop in town, Dansby and Haller Barbers, at 40 Macomb Street. Now, Grace and Joe bought this place, the property, in 1900 for the sum of $450. Excuse me, $450. But you know, you look at the deed and it says Lot 5 and Lot 9. Lot 5 and Lot 9? Well, back when these lots were divided, there was no Lincoln Street. The lots came off of Eldridge Street. The lots came off of Washington. The lots came off of Grove Park. There was no Lincoln Street. So this property right here belonged to this house right here. And that property over there belonged to the house down there.
So there was no homes in between? Just
No,
the corner?
there was no street.
No street.
The streets were this way. You had Grand Trunk Avenue, which was named after the railroad that came through here. You had Eldridge Street, which was named after the judge. The judge had a farm west of there. That was Judge Eldridge. This was the Hubbard's family. Euphemia Hubbard saw the future coming, and she said, you know what? We need to start dividing up the farm. The city of Mount Clemens needs to grow. And they added in Eldridge Street, and they added in Washington Street, and Grove Park Street. In fact, Grove Park Street dead-ended into a park that Euphemia Hubbard had set aside, and I believe they called it Grove Park on the map. It was a community area that they wanted to reserve. Of course, 30 years later, there is no Grove Park. It's gone. Go back to the old map. You got Hubbard Street. You got Grand Trunk Avenue. There's no Lincoln Street.
No.
This was part of the backyard of that house. That was part of the backyard of that house. This house is built on lot 5 and 9. Well, this was lot 5 over here. And that was lot 9 over there. So the people that bought that lot and that lot each shaved a bit off and they made a new lot. If you count the number of houses on the other side of the street, corner to corner, how many houses are there? Count them.
2, 5. Oh, corner to 5.
5. 5. Now count the number of houses on this side of the street.
4, 5, 6, 7, 6 or
6.
7.
6. They squeezed an extra house in, and it was right here.
Very ingenious.
See? $450.
Very ingenious.
Yeah. You wouldn't have noticed that otherwise.
No.
You look at those old maps, you can sure tell. Well, they got this January of 1900. They started building that summer. Took them about a year and a half to finish the house up. That's when Joe and Grace moved in. Grace had their first child, Phyllis. Phyllis was born right here in this house. And a month later, they sent out notes inviting people to Phyllis's wake. Phyllis lived about a month and died right here in this house. The Hubbard family had the undertaking services. So they came over and prepared the body and laid Phyllis out in the parlor. A couple years later, Grace had their second child. Of course, Grace's dad was getting on in years, and he sold his farm. I think he helped Joe and Grace get this going. And he moved in here with them. It's 1907. And Mr. Teets died right here in the house. Looked at the death certificate. Yep, they found the body in the bedroom. Hubbards were called. They came over, prepared the body, put it in a box in the parlor. And you can read his obituary where it says that his body is being viewed at his residence. Hello, here it is. Well, the Dansbys lived here a few more years, and their family was growing little by little. Of course, me and my wife, Emma, we lived over here on Grand Avenue, 100 Grand. That's where we raised our children. My daughter had a place over here at 67 Eldridge. That's Angeline and her husband Lafayette. Emma and me, we decided to get here. I knew Emma was going to outlive me. And she needed something to provide for her income when I was gone. I was technically retired, but I still did side jobs. I was trained as a bricklayer, a mason. I was a farmhand for too many years, and I didn't want to be a farmer. I'm not really truly sure where I came from. want to take you back to the year 1850. I was about that big, 5 years old. And a man came to the door, knocked on the door. Now, my family and I were living in the Leelanau Peninsula up near Traverse City area, a little town called Ridgeville. And the man said he was from the government, and he was there to count us. And he explained to Pa that in paperwork in Washington, D.C., it says that you got to count everybody in the United States every 10 years. They called it a census, and they write everybody's name down and some information about them. Well, they got Pa's name, Sydney. Pa's name, Lucretia. Got a sister, got a brother, got me, but Pa told him, you know what, the boy's name is different. My name is different? Well, Ma and Pa got the same name, and my sister, and my brother, they all got the same, but I got a different name. Well, after the man had counted us and left, I asked Ma, how come my name was different? And she said she didn't want to tell me because it would hurt me too much. Well, it was a few years later, Pa died. There was no way Ma could keep up on the farm and have 3 little ones. So she packed us kids up and moved us down to Ray Township. That's where her brother lived with his wife. Well, her brother said she could live there with 2 of the 3 kids. But I wasn't welcomed in his house. Mom made arrangements for me to work as a farmhand. My job was to get up early in the morning, work the farm, and I get a place to sleep and I get my meals. But it was really kind of exciting because the Sheldon family that took me in, they had a daughter named Emma. Emma was about 10 months older and just as pretty as a flower. Did I mention my bride's name? It was Emma Sheldon. So I stayed there. Now, Emma's pa called me in one day. One of the neighbor farmers came down. He was a captain in the Michigan Cavalry. And he was rounding up some of the local boys to go to war. Fight the Civil War. Now I lied a little bit about my age, but Pa said it was okay. I said I was 18. I was really only 17. But I signed up. Then we made the day-long trip down to the big city of Mount Clemens. That's where we met Stockton, down by the Colonial Hotel. And that's where our induction took place. I was gone for 3 years to war. That day I was made a bugler. Now they told me that in war there could be 1,000 men and 1,000 horses and 100 cannons. And there was no way the men could hear commands being given. That was my job. My job was to blow the trumpet. I had to learn the special songs, and the men had to learn the special songs to tell them which way to go. So I stayed close to the captain all the time. And he'd give me the orders, and I would sound the orders out on my bugle. You know, I hear tell from a regiment out of Ohio that they came up to a river one night, and they set up camp, and they looked across the river, and on the other side of the river, there was a bunch of the rebel fighters, and they set up camp on the other side of the river. Well, we had to make dinner, we had to build a fire, we had to write letters home, we had all the things to do in the evening. And so did they. So then we sat around the fire that night, and one of the boys pulled out a little banjo he'd brought from home, and we started singing, let the Rebs know we were here and alive. And we sang at the top of our lungs. Yankee Doodle Dandy. And we finished and we gave them our hooting and our hollering. We sat back. The boys on the other side of the river started singing, I wish I was in Dixie, hooray, hooray. And they did their hooting and hollering. It got quiet. And somebody started singing Home Sweet Home. And the boys on the north side of the river, the boys on the south side of the river all sang together. There wasn't a dry eye in the house that night. So when I came home, I came out of Chicago. I had to get a ride back to Michigan. And I showed up at the Sheldon's farm. The first thing I did was I asked Emma if she'd be my bride. She said yes. We got married, moved to Mount Clemens. I got an apprenticeship as a bricklayer. Spent 40 years laying bricks. It was an honorable profession. Probably laid some of the foundations of these very houses. I lived right over on Grant.
It's a beautiful home, and Arthur spoiled me.
My daughter Angeline, she married Lafayette Jones. They had 2 children, Frederick and Emma. In fact, that's a picture of Frederick and Emma right there in 1915, standing right in the back of the house. You can see the door still there. You can see the laundry room window right there. Can you see my daughter Angeline?
Very pretty.
That's my granddaughter, Emma. And that's Frederick. Can you see Angeline? Well, I'm sure the young'uns were kind of hooting and hollering outside, getting ready for the picture. Angeline's poking her head out the back door here, I'm sure, to see what in the world all the fuss was. And it was just taking a picture. That's my daughter, Angeline, right there. Of course, that's after me and Emma had passed and Angeline had taken over the house. Now, her and Lafayette stayed here until Angeline died here in 1939. Lafayette sold the house, and he moved to Florida. Can you imagine that? Florida. He lived there about 5 years till he died. But now these 2 young'uns went on with their lives. Now, Emma married a gentleman, and he wanted to return to his hometown in Ontario, Canada. So Emma was gone. Now Frederick and Lafayette, Frederick hung around a while. He got married about 5 years later to a nice girl named Nora. But him and Lafayette worked right here in town, in the foundry. Donaldson Brothers. You ever heard of Donaldson Brothers? Now the Donaldson Brothers company was started by one young man. He was 18 years old in a little rundown shop. And he built buggies. He repaired buggies. He repaired tires. His business grew little by little. He hired more people, more and more. Got a foundry going. And can you believe they even did community projects? I'm going to challenge you to walk out to the middle of the road, and there's a metal disc out there, and it has some writing on it. See, now I wasn't raised with an education. I want you to think I had it, but I didn't. If you read that writing out there, the writing says, Donaldson Brothers, Mount Clemens, Michigan. The Donaldsons closed, what, 70 years ago? They made that.
Whenever we look, they're from East Jordan, Michigan.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
We look for those, yeah.
Yeah.
You'll notice in your travels.
Yep. Yep. But this was a local firm. Just the same way Mr. Miller, that was a cement guy, he laid that cement, he laid that cement, he laid that cement. There's Donaldson's in doing community. Now over the years, they did manage to rent the house to a lot of families. One was the Wales family. Now the Wales actually had a boarding house over on Cass Avenue at 193 Cass. And you can see the little sign that says room for rent right there. And if you can't see it, squint a little more. If you still can't see it, trust me.
Okay.
Now this was a family get-together, but you got running water. You got yourself a pitcher, and you ran down the stairs out to the pump here. See the pump? That's where you got your water, right there. Now that was the Wales place somewhere before the turn of the century. Of course, the family did have a nice portrait taken. A little dark for my taste, but that was the look of the time. And that's the Wales family. Of course, little Ray Wales, he lived right here in this house when he was in 4th grade. Went to Dickinson School.
So did we.
Okay, that's Ray Wales right there.
That's your
1921. Look at that. That's Ray. So they had a lot of families that stayed here over the years. Of course, I'm here to kind of brag on my family. And I got to share a couple of pictures. That boy's name is Patterson. He's related to Emma, my granddaughter. This is my great-great-grandson. He served in the RCAF, and he was buried. He died in 1944 while serving in the Royal Canadian Air Force. At the same time, another great-great-grandson was serving in the U.S. Navy. Richard Lafayette Humphreys. Richard made it home. Richard got married, had children, those children had children. Richard raised his family in Royal Oak, Michigan. Lived there the rest of his life. He died there in 2014. I want to thank you folks for visiting today. It's been an honor.
Very good. Awesome. Joyce do a good job. Great. Kudos.
I want to share a little information. I want to see how many of you stand out in the middle of the street looking now. You got to look at that out there.
Yeah.
My husband looks all over the country for that other one.
Oh, the East Jordan? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Here comes the car.
Did you make a lot of hats? I saw somebody wearing one.
Auto dealership.
Yeah, I thought they said your family also.
Unless George didn't live there. George was the one that owned it.
Yeah.
I have to research that. So it was a different thing.
My mom worked.
My budget
Go ahead.
is $350. Well, thanks for coming, folks. I'm so glad that you came. Well, you know, I was really excited about this. Yes. And I knew Ed wouldn't be able to do the walk, so I was really surprised that Dave came, because I don't see this being the Dave kind of thing. Well, welcome to my house. I am Luella Kirchhoff Warren. I was born in 1870 in Fenton, Michigan. Do you know where that is? Yes. It was rural, believe me, when I was a kid there. It was a nice place to grow up. My parents were of Scottish ancestry, and I didn't have any brothers or sisters. I was an only child. And I just wasn't like the other girls that I grew up around with. I mean, they were anxious to... Well, hi and welcome to my home. I am Luella Kirchhoff, and I was born in Fenton, Michigan. You know where that is? Bit rural. I didn't have any siblings, and to be honest, I just wasn't quite like the rest of the ladies in my community at that time. I really wasn't anxious to get married right away. I wanted something else. So I found an ad. They needed a clerk up in St. Ignace. You know where that is, up in the Upper Peninsula? So I took a job as a clerk up there, and it was exciting because people would come up for the summers up to the Upper Peninsula and Mackinac Island, which is right there. It was just beautiful. But as I was there, I was thinking, you know, I had time to think. I thought, you know, maybe I should start looking for Mr. Right. So I put an ad in the wanted section in the phonographic magazine listing that I wanted someone to correspond with, basically a pen pal. And that was common at that time. So guess what? Guess who I meet? Do you see that handsome guy there with the beard in the frame picture? I meet Arthur J. Warren, M.D. The wait was worth it, let me tell you. His parents were from England, and that certainly rubbed off on him. He was a perfect gent. He was interesting, he was educated, and he asked me to marry him. And I married him in St. Ignace at the Episcopal Church on July 21st, 1897. He was from here. His parents were from England, but they moved here because they opened up the Fountain Hotel. You know, well, he was proprietor at that time of the Fountain Hotel. And that was a wonderful hotel at the time because it was the first to have electricity. And it was the first to have an elevator. So a lot of people would come to the hotel just for those things. You know, they never saw electricity or went in an elevator before. And I fit in right perfect with his family. I was used to being a clerk, and I helped them with the fountain. So it was perfect. I loved Mount Clemens because there's something to do all the time. Restaurants, theater, music, everything. It was great. I loved living here. Well, we lived in the hotel for the first 9 years of our marriage. And, you know, there's no privacy. We really wanted our own home. So when the McIntyres next door, they built that house in the 1890s, they had to sell their home and move out of state. And they sold it in 1904, but they sectioned off their property. So we purchased this piece of land in 1905 in May, and we set to building our own home. It was a dream come true, let me tell you. Love this house. It looked a little bit different. It didn't have the siding on it. It was clapboard. And it didn't have this porch on it, but I do like that porch. But it was a beautiful home, and my husband spoiled me. I was able to afford a domestic servant. We had young girls in the neighborhood help us, you know, help with the cooking, the cleaning, and so forth. And my husband even installed a little button on the floor of the dining room where he could press the button and it would ring in the kitchen to let them know we needed something. So it was really nice. I only had a domestic in this house live with me at one time, and that was in 1917. Yeah, you know, and then the war. The Great War happened, and my husband enlisted. He enlisted in the Army Medical Corps, and there were a couple other doctors in town that enlisted as well, Dr. Schur, Dr. Barry, and they were shipped together to France to establish a hospital over there for our soldiers. I wasn't too thrilled about the idea. I was worried. But off he went. He had to do his bit. And that he did. And when the war ended, I really was anxious for him to come home, but he didn't come home right away because he had still a job to do at the hospital there. So I thought, you know what, I'm getting on a ship and I'm going to see him. And that I did. First big voyage across the ocean in 1919. It was quite an adventure. I was glad to see him. We came home, came back to this house, Now, mind you, he was a doctor at the Medea Hotel. And there was a great need of doctors in this town, the mineral bath industry booming. But then when he came back from the war, the Sisters of Charity, you know, at the St. Joseph's Hospital, they needed doctors, and they asked him. He became a doctor for them at St. Joe's, and that was an excellent position to have. He was also a surgeon. And in fact, he worked there till he died. He did so well financially, he built me that beautiful home you see in the frame, that Tudor mansion. It's on the river, on Bellevue. Beautiful home. He was English, you know, English ancestry. He wanted a Tudor. I can't complain. I had that river to look at every day and that beautiful house, big fireplace. It was beautiful. But it was, and his parents were living with us. It was 6 years after he built the house that he developed kidney disease. And bless his heart, he worked all the way up until just the last 4 months of his life. He got so sick that he himself became a patient at the hospital he worked at St. Joe's, and he passed away. We had no kids, and here I am in that big house. No kids, no other family, and I decided it was best to sell the house. And so I bought a smaller home on High Street, 104 High Street, and I can't complain. I lived to be 90 years old, took my last breath in that house, and didn't have to go to infirmary or anything. I was able to live in my home until I was 90. I died in the house of a cerebral hemorrhage. Saw a lot of changes in town, so I have no complaints. This was a great place to live. Do you want me to go on about the house?
Go ahead, we got time.
Okay. You know, I kept up with a little bit with the house. In 1925, when we sold this home, the Browns bought it. And he worked for Shutt Furniture. I don't know if you've heard of it. But sadly, he died in the home in 1931. And, you know, the Depression years were hard. His poor widow could not afford the house. She let it go to the bank. And then eventually another couple bought it, and he was an artist. He actually sold art at a Detroit gallery, and he actually then established a business here in town, a gown shop for ladies, so it was very nice. And they had a couple kids, or a few kids, and then they sold it. The man who bought it next worked for Borg Warner. I think he was like a chemist or something there. And then I just kind of lost track of who was living in the home after that. The home went through more changes. And the lady that lives here now, we get along pretty well. She likes the home, and I'm glad she likes the home. She's put up some beautiful wallpaper that was true to the era of the house when it was built. So I like to visit. It's a great place to visit, don't you think? Do you like my house?
I do.
I think so too. Thank you. So you're welcome. If you like, you can look in the garden. She has a pond back there with fish and a waterfall. We didn't have that when I was living here, but I like to visit, and I hope you do too. Is that a good note to end it on? Did I cut it down, I think.
It's fine.
Okay.
If you want to add more, you can add more.
I'm done. That's good.
Okay, very good.
Fred, thank you for coming out. This poor guy, I called him yesterday. Can you come film it?
Oh, thank you. You're a great crowd, great crowd.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it.
Hey, here's our local postman. How you doing, guy? How's everything going back there?
Pardon?
How's everything going?
As good as it can right now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Are you getting out as much mail? I mean, are you getting out as much mail? Or?
Oh, all the mail that comes to me I bring out.
Good. All right.
Have a good day.
job. Thanks.